very good morning to you all and welcome to Views, People and News here on 933 KFM this Saturday, the 25th of January 2025. My name is Judith Atim. Today we are looking at NRM at 39 and we're asking, is Uganda at a crossroads? And I am pleased to be joined by two fantastic gentlemen. Retired Major Awich Pollar, who is the Director for External Relations at the NRM. Good morning, Major, and welcome to the show.
Good morning. Thank you so much, and greetings to my colleague.
And I also have the pleasure to host for the very first time Dr. Jimmy Spire Ssentongo, academic and social critic. Good morning, Doctor.
Good morning, Judith, and thanks for having me.
Pleasure to have you. So tomorrow, Sunday, the 26th of January, the NRM will mark 39 years since it took power by overthrowing Dr. Milton Obote's government in a military coup in 1985. Well, NRM loyalists refer January 26th as Liberation Day, but some sections, including those in the opposition camp, have often posed the question, liberation from what? But regardless of which side you belong, the NRM is by far the longest-serving party or government Uganda has ever known. And as it turns 39 tomorrow, again, it's an opportunity for us to pause and reflect on the past, the present, and also to project into the future. Later in the show, my guests will also be sharing their thoughts on the good, the bad, and maybe the ugly things that have happened under the NRM rule, and also the collective aspirations of Ugandans or the future Ugandans hope for. Before we get into this conversation, however, let's just look at some of the highlights of the week. Starting from abroad, on Monday, the new U.S. President Donald Trump was sworn into office in the presence of four other living former U.S. presidents, including Bill Clinton, George W. Bush, Barack Obama, and Joe Biden. And at his inauguration, Trump announced a raft of executive orders which came into immediate effect, touching on energy, immigration, gender, health, education, foreign relations, and so on. Back at home here in Uganda, on Thursday, the Minister of Education and Sports, Judith, officially released the 2024 primary leaving examinations results after a briefing by a number of senior UNEB officials. According to UNEB, the results indicate an improved performance from learners. And also on Friday, that's yesterday, it emerged that the Supreme Court is expected to finally deliver a landmark ruling on the constitutionality of trying civilians in military courts. The case that has been in court since 2016 stems from a challenge by former Nakawa MP Michael Kabaziguruka, and the ruling will be to determine the authority vested in the judiciary and the protection of human rights. In this case, Kabaziguruka contends that military courts lack the jurisdiction to try civilians and that such practices undermine the principles of fair trial and equality before the law. The Attorney General appeals the earlier ruling, which was in favor of Kabaziguruka. And relatedly, members of Parliament from the Human Rights Committee visited the incarcerated Dr. Kiza Besige in Luzira prison, where he is detained with his colleague Obeid Lutale on allegations of being found in possession of ammunition. And President Yoweri Museveni has also spent the better part of this week in Busoga sub-region. Since Wednesday, the president has camped there on government wealth creation drives. He's monitoring parish development model performance and so on. He has been in Namutumba, Jinja, Kamuli, and will have a rally later today. He will also have a televised national address tonight at 8 p.m. on matters related to NRM's liberation struggle, which brought it to power, and it will be marking 39 years tomorrow. The national celebrations, of course, will be in Mubende district. Also, the Electoral Commission on Monday officially kicked off the update of the National Voters Register ahead of the 2026 general elections. Elsewhere, the UPC President, Honorable Jimmy Akena, on Wednesday declared he will vie for the presidency in 2026. And from the FDC at Najanankumbi, the party president, Engineer Patrick Amuriat, together with a few of his leadership, also hosted Democratic Alliance's team headed by Matthias Mpuga on his ongoing consultation with political stakeholders over his intentions on electoral and political reforms. And from the NUP camp, the party president, Honorable Robert Chagulanyi, yesterday graced a homecoming event for the party's new deputy president for Buganda region, Honorable Muwanga Chivumbi in Butambala. Earlier on in the week, the party held a press conference in which they addressed a number of reservations on the ongoing voter register update, which is being undertaken by the Electoral Commission. Let me take this opportunity to welcome my final guest, Honorable Proscovia Salaamu Musumba of the PFF. Good morning, Honorable.
Good morning, my dear sister.
You look so bright this morning.
Well, I was coming to meet Dr. Spire, and I was looking forward to seeing him. It's been a long time.
Okay.
And say thank you to him for his resilience and for flavoring the political space. Mm-hmm. And yours truly.
What do you have to say for Major? To make
He's my friend too.
Okay.
We got plenty of stuff to share.
I'm looking forward to that.
And good morning to you, all our listeners. Thank you for tuning in.
Thank you. So just your quick thoughts. It's been quite a busy week, as you heard. So just your quick thoughts. Pick one or two things that you would like to respond to. I think I'll start with you, Dr. Spire.
Yeah, good morning once again to our listeners. Sorry, my voice is a bit
the cold, croaky.
Yeah, but the two major highlights for me is the continued incarceration of Dr. Kiza Besigye and Obed, and their continued trial in the military court. Something that has been challenged over times because it's not the first time. Even there are so many others. The NUP group, civilians who are being tried quite unfairly in the military courts. So that is really an issue. And also now that I'm told Dr. Besigye is not allowed even to get food from his visitors, which I think should be his right. I don't know why he's being treated in a very different way from other prisoners, leave alone the fact that it's not fair in the first place for him to be there. So that's one of them, plus the case of Kiza was sentenced to 9 months, which I think is excessive, even if one said that there was an issue with how he behaved, which I don't agree with. And then the money that has just been passed, given to Luboa and State House. Yeah, quite, I wouldn't say shocking because this has been the trend, it's only growing, but it is really concerning that money continues, our money, I should emphasize, it continues being dished out for no result, but we have been, maybe not to say disempowered, but we have reached a point where these things happen and people are getting used to them. You just hear a whisper or a murmur here and there, but nothing really happens when we clearly know that this money is being stolen, that this is wastage. So for me, those are the key highlights.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Dr. Spire. Major.
Yeah, good morning once again. And as you said, there are a lot of things which came up in the week. You just asked us to pick one or two of interest. So I will comment about Trump. Because ideally, 193 countries of UN are sovereign countries, and you are supposed to act and live independently. But we all know that sovereignty doesn't exist in a vacuum. We all interface, and especially for a country like America, they infringe on sovereignty of others. So somehow, what happens in America affects us. So as Trump comes in, I noticed that his emphasis on America first, but make no mistake that it would be like closing borders and dealing with America. No, they'll still be doing external things, but only in the best interest of America. I mean, the man wants to grab Panama, he wants to grab Canada, really a whole country like Canada, one of the G10 or G8, and the King of England is seeing, and yet Canada, Australia is under the King of England, and then he wants to grab Iceland. So that is really not to say they are going to do internal things. But what interests me here is this gender policy. because he says that there's male and female. And we had already had genders like queer or others. Now, this affected us because even in the employment, we're already being told, if you have 10 people, please, we want to see 2 homosexuals in your employment list of staff. Now, if they tone down on their gender policies, which was really being hit hard on us, those of us like Uganda and Ghana, which had passed that law, I think may some point look a hero or heroes. And those who had not, I don't know where they will go. So, because you have a system like a culture like this, and you have a country like Uganda where everything, even this matoke, if you take to parliament that people should eat, or even bread or cake, there will be opposition. But on that topic, it was all parties came together and somebody comes and says nonsense. So that is all I picked, that maybe now would be relieved from such, and it gives us sovereignty. Supreme Court also, I've really been waiting for this, and in most of my engagement, I've been saying we wait for it. Because the point here is that there's an act of parliament, which was passed in parliament, I think Honorable Musumba was there, which allowed trial. So the other jurists are saying, was that provision correct? Isn't it unconstitutional? So I really want this argument to come out, and I don't care which way it comes, as long as it comes in the best interest of the country. If the Supreme Court so rules that, please, that insertion of that section in the UPDF Act was an omission or an error on the minds of the legislature, then the legislature will hone it. But also we know laws are not made on hard and frozen ground. If the provision is struck off, so what? Then the trial goes, because justice is everywhere. So me, I'm not particular that Supreme Court rules that trial continues in the army. Or I'm not saying, I just want the best wisdom to come out of that and sort out this matter.
Thank you, Major. Honorable Salam, I'd like to hear your thoughts. You just pick one or two things, but also I'm also interested, Honorable, the President is in Busoga, one of the most impoverished regions. He's, of course, on a wealth creation tour,
laughable,
assessing PDM and so on. I'd also like to hear your thoughts on that.
Well, thank you very much. And I should say the year is moving pretty fast. It still requires me to wish our listeners a happy new year and make the best of it. And also to remind ourselves in history that it was today, the 25th of January 1971, that a coup happened by Idi Amin. And the events that led to that coup are repeating themselves here as well. It had to do with an investigation in Congo. It had to do with the robbery of ivory. And history so quickly repeats itself that we are in Congo again, stealing gold and stealing Ugandan opportunity for private purposes. It's also not lost on me that it was actually the 25th of January when NRA took power. It was on the 25th. But because they did not want to repeat that date, they held and postponed it to 26th. The real treachery and distortion of even timelines, because it was on the 25th. I was at university, and I was old enough to tell. And so when you juxtapose the events of 25th January 71 and those of 26th January 86, the character of politics and the character of governance looks the same and is the same. Talking about Dr. Besigye, it's really very sad. And I try very much to avoid it because it gets very emotional. And this is a man, maybe the only one of the men who has touched the buttocks of somebody And it's that man that is being incarcerated. Incarcerated so painfully. He has gone on hunger strike because he prefers that he kills himself than be killed in prison by poisoning, because his brother did die. Mr. Sisi died. It's not a joke. It's a fact. And so, knowing him, he's made a choice that he'd rather die by choice than be killed to the greatest glee of him here and his lot. And so it's really sad, and it has touched many people in such an emotional way, because the history is not lost to them. The pain is not lost to them, and I thank you for feeling his pain. But of course, monstrously, the judiciary doesn't, and the court-martial doesn't. You know, it's so annoying that people who speak the same language, let me call it Banyankole, they can actually hold court in Runyankole. All those guys there in their peeps, they can speak Runyankole. Just listen to their tongue, the milk tongue, and you will know that they could hold the court-martial in Runyankole and even keep records in Runyankole. And they, without flinching, they hand down very monstrous decisions without even batting an eye. And so I kept being reminded that if they can do this to one of them in full global glare, what did they do to northern Uganda for 20 years? What did they do? Out of sight, out of camera. And the record is very clear. It has been called genocide in northern Uganda for some time. I was working for the Red Cross when all that was happening, so I was privy to so much pain that the people of northern Uganda felt. They have been lured into NRM to pacify that history. You know, they are prepared to shortchange or to exchange their pain. They are lost 2 decades for Pajeros and Impenkonis. They are ready to sell their land and to intimidate their own people from Penkonis. That hurts me. Now back in Busoga. What is there to write home about Busoga and this visit? I saw the most bored president in a long time. I was so bored, so irritated. You know, I think he just walked there and said, there they go again. He's so tired of us. I could see fatigue in him. You know, I could see disinterest in him. And, you know, he kept mocking them and laughing. You are very poor. You journalists. You don't work. Didn't you see that?
Yeah.
Very poor. And they laughed back, these bastards. They laughed back in full global glare. Then they go visit a person with 2 heifers, 3 heifers, make them 10. And that is supposed to be a beneficiary of PDM. PDM gives 1 million. And they said in their documents that they were giving to the 35% most vulnerable. No vulnerable person can possess 7 heifers. And so he asks, how much is a cow? And they say, 7 million. But remember, this is a person they gave 1 million. Okay? You see that kind of fraud. And all those ministers in the big cars, they've come in, you know, they all have 4-wheel drives and they all, the latest 2024 model edition. Mm-hmm. And they have gone to see 2 cows. Bastards. They've gone to see 2 cows. And they're telling this country a lie that this one miraculous million PDM manufactured 7 heifers. So they tell lies to themselves, they tell lies to the nation, and then go to the airfield, Chimaka airfield. And the first thing they tell you that is technically not possible. Technically, I listen to them on radio. Technically, there's a defect on the aspiration of making Chimaka an airfield because the runway is too short and they don't have the land. Okay? And now they go and tell lies to the public that Chimaka airfield, they are commissioning it. They are commissioning it. Chimaka Road, which was commissioned 20 years ago, has not been fixed. And then look, they tell we Basoga that we cannot compensate your land in building road infrastructure. You accept your land to be taken. Where else in this country has that been told? And they're telling Basogas to tell other Basogas. And I'm telling Basogas, don't. Just you don't. This madness must end. You see, our poverty is man-made. Our poverty in Basoga is policy-made. It is politically made. Because all the wealth that comes into this country passes by our region and passes us by and never returns. Remember, we were the industrial engine of this country. What happened? We generate 4 power dams. Isimba, Budagali, Chira, and the other. 4. We create wealth for this country. Because the boundary of Busoga is the west bank of the River Nile. So the entire river belongs to us, from source. And then you walk all over us, you spit on us. You know? You belch on us. You, the peasants of yesterday. You belch on us having stolen our wealth, stolen our industries, stolen everything to us. And then they parade poverty. Today they have paraded borders in Uganda and the glee of wearing a stupid yellow shirt when they are going to sleep hungry tonight. They are planless. Their children don't go to school. Okay? I mean, this is madness. Total madness. And you look at the so-called leaders. Everybody's bragging on self-interest. Do you know we have the biggest wealth resource of rare earth? Rare earth, its value is bigger than oil. You know we are going to house a nuclear plant. And we are the command center of poverty. I mean, it's disgusting. That's why I resorted to laughing instead of crying. Because this is bullshit from morning to evening.
Thank you, Honorable. On that note, let's take a break and then we come back and dive into our discussion, which is NRM at 39, and we're asking whether Uganda is at a crossroads. We'll be back shortly. Welcome back from the break. It is VPN here on 933 KFM. My name is Judith Atim, and I'm pleased to be joined by retired Major Awich Pollar, who is the Director for External Relations at NRM, Dr. Jimmy Spire Ssentongo, academic and social critic, as well as Honorable Proscovia Salaamu Musumba of the PFF. And we are discussing NRM at 39, is Uganda at a crossroads. I'll return to you now, Major Awich. I'm sure you still have some responses to make in relation to what Honorable Salam submitted. But as you do that, I would also pose the question, at 39 years of age, at 39 years of power, in 39 years of power, what are the gains of the NRM? And I'd like all of us also have a candid conversation where you think, all of you, Dr. Spire and Honorable Musumba, where you think NRM has genuinely actually contributed. And then later we shall come to the not so good things that we think deserve mention, and also how course can be corrected. Major, the mic is yours.
Yeah, just a few comments on what Honorable Salama said. She was wondering that if the court martial, which appears composed of Banyankole, although I think there's a nationality balancing there, really. I could come up with the names. But I was wondering if this be what they can hand over to even Kiza for contempt of court, 9 months. The one of Carol Kiza is not yet known, but Aaron Kiza for contempt of court was given 9 months, which I think Dr. Spire said is excessive.
Illegal.
Maybe things should have been 3 months.
Illegal. Even the law prescribes. The maximum it should be. Can't you see this? You're a lawyer.
Yes. So she was wondering what could have transpired in the north. Somehow I am lucky that I've been part of this NRA thing. So I've known it properly well. But if I could cut short what could have happened in the north is that the intrinsic build-up of NRA is so robust that you cannot expect a wrong in the army in the north as you think. I refer to Honorable Musumba, to a friend of hers called Basakana Hannington. You know, the PC, the commissariat system inside the commissariat is built to be an internal checks and balances, such that you can't, any violations that has occurred, anyway, it is the exception to the rule. But the protection of human rights, including injured, is so well built in the army that whichever hearsay you hear, no, it is not what was done in operation. In fact, if you met a group of political commissars in a conference or in a meeting, you think you are meeting rebels instead, because they're intentionally built to do checks and balances, and it is in operation. I can tell you there was a time in Pollar.
Give us one.
In Pollar, we had an encounter where the rebels attacked our unit, and we rushed for rescue. So when we picked the injured plus the enemy, and we were in a lorry. I was the PC taking them to Gulo Hospital. Unfortunately, our soldiers who were injured had guns. We were almost killed in the lorry because the injured were annoyed. But we had to disarm the injured because we had to take both the injured rebels and the injured soldiers. And this is an inbuilt system.
In accordance with the Geneva Convention.
That is practically what I'm telling you, what political commissars do, as opposed to intelligence. So no worry about the northern. If the exception to the rule, it depends on some individual commanders who acted out of emotion. But the intent in the build-up of the army is that in NRA, which converted to UPDF. So no worry about the north. I participated in it myself. Now, about the visiting of the 2 cows. You know, when you look at the 2 cows, you are looking at 2 cows. But if you look at a macro, that the 2 is for Mr. Wafula or Mr. Okwir or Mugisha. But you're looking at it at a national level, or even if you take at a parish level. So the effect on Ugandans will be assessed shortly. And some assessment has been made. The impact is good. So we don't have to zero on a particular 2 cows that is visited. We're looking at it holistically. So that is my comment. I have many, but I will zero on that now. About, you say I should move forward to...
but before you do so, still on the northern question that I'm glad Honorable Musumba raised and that you've responded to. Their concerns, of course, there's still a lot of pain in the hearts of the people of the north when it comes to having justice done. Cases of, say, mass rape of men. I was actually reading, I was with a colleague chatting in a group yesterday, and that's another issue that came up, the mass rape of men that went
the spread of HIV/AIDS.
Yes, that too. The Mukura incident, for instance, in Teso and the Sodom. Yes, those issues that were systematically covered up and never brought to the fore, and to date, no one talks about it. No justice has been given to the victims. How do you respond to that?
Mukura is a fact. It did happen, and I wonder, and by then the PC in Mbale was, I think, Semwezi. That was before Basakana took over. That was Semwezi. He's now a brigadier. But it was at a brigade level. This was a battalion level. That was unfortunate. But there are things like mass sodomy. This is laughable. And you know,
Disease.
I do not think
victims are there.
Where do you get men to line up? And no way.
But if you have them today in Luzera.
You see, when you say that, it is a myth created. Like I've seen many. Like somebody can say, Mayembe is there. And then they said somebody went with somebody's wife and his genital organ was put on his face. Mm-hmm. Now, when you ask who, you will say, Mukasa told me. When you go to Mukasa, Mutebi told me. When you go to Mutebi, the Semakande told me. When you told you will go on and on. And it's a myth. The thing of mass sodomy.
No, I think we can't reduce such an injustice to mythology.
Mass sodomy. Where? Which village?
Just a minute.
Which battalion?
Sexual offenses, even where women are raped, people cannot come out openly. And look at how our cultures. Yes, look at culture. If someone violated you in such a manner, would you have the courage to
imagine just touching your breast, breast, an unwanted touch? Mm-hmm. You know,
you feel
so demeaning.
Yeah, and you may not even talk about it. And a lot of women go through this and they don't talk.
If it is a mass sodomy, then it is a crime that must be recorded.
And where's the record of Northern Uganda?
Now, if it is not there, then that is what I'm saying. It's a falsehood.
It's to erase. It's to erase that history.
It is a mass, and then at the same time you say it is sacred. It's a contradiction to have something massive and something confidential or something sacred. Total contradiction. It can't be massive, a massive rape at the same time confidential. Are we speaking English?
Okay, do you remember the kids in Kitgum that used to move every evening to come to the city?
The night commuters.
Yes, it happened all over.
And
was it mass?
It was not only Kitgum, it was Gula as well.
The point here is, when you sleep in the villages and the rebels come, they would kill you. So what you do is to come to town for safety. It was actually in their best interest to come to safety.
And they were being protected.
But if you tell me a contradiction in literature, literal translation or grammatical sense, that the sodomy was mass, but at the same time the sodomy was sacred. What English are we talking?
It's the right English, by the way.
It can't be.
It is.
Okay. I think we'll give you the mic, and then you'll come back with the successes, of course, the achievements of the NRM.
Yeah, this is an interesting, but at the same time, as Honorable Salaamu said, a painful discussion. Yeah, we can talk about the achievements and the failures of NRM, but the most painful thing is that you're talking about lives of people. You're talking about pains that people move with every day, things that they might never forget. In Uganda, we have a saying that so in the same way, even with action, you can do something to someone and you forget, but the victim never forgets. Or if they forget or pass away, their people never forget. Now, we are talking about whether the sodomy was mass or there were just a few incidences, but the person to whom it happened...
It is mass.
The person to whom it happened, even if it's one, even if there are two, even if there are three, that means a lot, much more than you can imagine on the other side, where you're simply playing an analytic role. We could ask, if this happened, why haven't they been tried? This is criminal. But we know for the same reason why the CDF is committing offenses in broad daylight and nothing is happening to him. We know he's violating the UPDF Act, is violating so many laws, is threatening people with murder, with whatever, but nothing is happening. So we cannot simply ask the question, why haven't these people been tried if it's a crime? The things we are talking about are being documented. Refugee Law Project extensively documented the cases of sodomy. If you want the literature, it is there, and even with testimonies of the victims. I've seen one of
and on camera, I've met an NGO in the US on camera. They're just waiting for the right time.
Yeah, there is even a name for it that was created locally. I think you know it. Yeah.
Yes,
Except if you're saying that if all this is fiction, that people just sat and created that.
And that's what they want to create, a new narrative about the war.
Yeah, so there is a lot of evidence, only that people cannot come out only that the circumstances do not allow the truth to come to the surface at the moment. But we know that at some point it will come out. And even if the NRM stays in power for 40, 50, whatever years,
even a century,
at a certain point all this will come out. The victims might die, but their relatives will survive. Their grandchildren will live to remember. Because these stories of pain are handed down. They are inherited stories of pain, what our grandfather went through. Up to now, there are people who are talking about what they went through in the 60s, in the 70s. How many years is it ago?
In World War I.
Yes, or even in World War I.
In the Japanese War.
Yeah. So if we think that this is going to be forgotten, it's years since it happened, I don't think that is going to be the case, especially when we are talking about pain, when we are talking about loss of lives, we are talking about dehumanization, gross dehumanization of people who still carry these burdens. But going back to the question of the liberation, if we may call it, that we are celebrating, I have to use the word celebration because it's a public thing, it's a national day, but some people are celebrating, others don't even want to think about the day. Yes, there are a few things that you can talk about, as Major said, a few things you can talk about the achievements ever since, the achievements in terms of the army. Mostly you talk about the army, the disciplining of the army. In the past you could you could not do this. Now I heard someone say the other day that now you can even hold, I think it was Andrew Mwenda, that you can even argue with the general in the bar, even slap them, and you go home knowing that nothing will happen to you. That is one side of a narrative that we always want to put forward. But at the same time, we are seeing the same army is increasingly going down, back. In fact, it's the general narrative. And the most difficult thing, I think, in your private conversation, Major, you'll also agree that in so many ways, the NRM, the current government, or AUPDF, it is simply doing the same things, almost all the things that it came in opposition of. Almost everything that motivated the war and that was celebrated in 1986 is being repeated. The things that were blamed of Idi Amin, that were blamed of Obote, right from stealing elections, we know that it is happening. It's happening massively. The torture of people, of civilians. What happened, for instance, in the elections of 2021, that an entire campaign group of an opponent could be rounded up on an island and thrown into jail during election time. I think even Obote did not reach that extent. At least President Museveni campaigned in the 1980s up to finishing his entire campaign. I don't know whether his team was ever arrested like that. So there are many things which every moment you talk about an achievement, immediately you notice that that achievement is being reversed.
Countered.
Yes, the army that we are talking about now, it is headed by someone, the CDF, a person that even those in the army would be ashamed of associating with him in view of the statements that he makes in public. Statements that even, the other time I said, even a child would clearly tell that this is inappropriate. That even if it's a joke, as one time he came out to say, that a person who is prudent...
It's a tasteless joke.
Yes, a person who is in their right senses cannot make a joke to say that we are going to hang so-and-so. When we are done with hanging so-and-so, we are going to behead so-and-so. We are going to crush the head of the person, and then after that, my daughter can never be married to anyone apart from a Muhima. Even when you hold such a sentiment, she cannot be married to anyone apart from a pure Muhima. And then Chagulanyi is not a Muganda, he is a Murundi and actually a Hutu. With all the sentiments that you know around the ethnicity issues among the Hutu Tutsi, you hear blowing out the same narrative. The tribalism, which is actually criminal by the UPDF Act. There is, I think, it is section 24 and 17. Section 24 talks about, they call it subversion. He has done all the subversion, where they talk about quarreling. He has done the quarreling with colleagues in the army. He has done that publicly, coming out to call his colleague a buffoon. Yes, truly. It's a buffoon. I'm going to arrest this buffoon. So that is the person in charge. Yes. All the Bachwezi fantasies and how he's constantly trying to demean others, constantly trying to show the supremacy of a particular tribe over others.
That narrative.
Well knowing the pains that people have, well knowing where tribalism has taken us as a country, this is the head of the army that we are talking about on a day that we call Liberation Day. Now, all that aside, even if you would have said that, well, someone can make such statements, but nothing is happening to him. Why? Because he's the son of the president. As a son of the president, he has all the license to say whatever he wants, just like a spoiled child. That today the child can come and ease themselves on the table, and there are people who are clapping. Oh, he's easing himself in a very, a very interesting way. The following day he goes and hits the windows of a neighbor. I'm going to attack Nairobi. Still, there is a silence because Major Awich, I know, even if you wanted to say these things, you cannot say them. You know what is likely to happen to you. Why? Because of his position. There is no one, I think, who has a problem with General Mohoz being a CDF for as long as it's on merit and he qualifies, and we can, if we could clearly see it, that he is the most qualified of all people. Even when he wants to stand for president and he resigns from the retires or whatever, and he does that, I think there wouldn't be a problem. The only problem is the privilege, the biological privilege that he is using to say all sorts of unbecoming things, to do all sorts of things that otherwise wouldn't be allowed of anyone. The other time, General Tumukunde made only one statement appearing on CBS. We saw what happened to him. There are other soldiers who have gone through a lot just by uttering one statement, but this is consistent. The kind of embarrassment that I think the UPDF is faced now, that every time he tweets, I'm sure they are just there on their toes. Okay, what is he going to say now? What is the next bottom that he's going to go to? I don't think we can be at a point of celebration, and especially knowing that we cannot do anything about such a phenomenon. So that is part of the dilemma, but it is embedded within an atmosphere of impunity that has been created. Impunity where certain people can get away with glaring wrongs, can get away with glaring corruption. We made an exhibition of Parliament the other day, and you must have seen the things that came out in that exhibition. The monies these people are giving themselves in per diem, in fake travels, fake conferences, buying themselves generators. But what happened? The president comes out and calls us,
foreign agents.
Yes, foreign agents. He said that we are traitors. The ones that are reporting corruption are the traitors. And then he patted on the back those who are stealing. Patted them on the back because they were able to go and kneel the following day to say, I believe in the Father, the Son, and all that. They built buildings and named them after him and after the son and after the daughter-in-law. All such things happening when we are celebrating liberation. That we are being liberated from what? At a time when corruption is now being defended. Where we would have been together saying that this is our money. This money is supposed to improve our roads, supposed to improve hospitals. But now one of the things we fear most is to expose the corrupt. People have paid prices for exposing the corrupt. I have been threatened for doing that. My colleagues at Agora, those in opposition, they have been threatened simply for exposing corruption. The president who says every day that there will be at the beginning of every year, he announces this year there will be zero tolerance to corruption, which has simply become a song, sort of a slogan. But we see what is happening on the ground. Who of those powerful in court is being touched? Is this what we call liberation? What exactly do we mean when we talk about liberation.
Thank you. Honorable Salam. Yes, please respond, and then I give the mic.
He's enjoying himself.
Yes. Now, first of all, I want to make some clarification about, I think something maybe I didn't put it clearly. I was saying in the operation in the north, the general rule is that the inbuilt system, the checks and balances in the army, is so robust that it could not encourage a massive policy position or negligence like massive raping of men. Now, that does not, I even said that is a general rule. The exception is there. For example, why then were we wagging the code of conduct everywhere? If things were so good, we wouldn't have been peddling code of conduct. Code of conduct, we are doing it because here we were involved in an operation of about 40,000 soldiers. 40,000 human beings. You can't expect the discipline to be the same. There was rules of code of conduct because we expected it. Two, in this code of conduct, it is known how many firing squad we carried out in the north for soldiers who misbehave. So I don't want mind saying that we had internal build system to check the checks and balances to say there was nothing wrong. There were things which went wrong, but not as a matter of policy. And that is why we are working our code of conduct everywhere. And that's why we had firing squad. We did a lot of firing squad on our soldiers for excesses that they did. So we should be judged on an institutional and a methodological approach, not that it was that policy. You cannot have 40,000 soldiers in an operation, even in Iraq by America, and you don't expect that. So I just wanted to make that clear. Now, we are talking about, I'm now trying to discern between addressing liberation per se or achievements, because we are mixing. I find it won't come out too clear. But let me first address liberation as it is. Liberation, and then I talk of the achievement in that. The concept of liberation is that it came out maybe in a summary statement by President Museveni that this is not a mere change of guards, but a fundamental change. The whole thing is that the status quo then had to be changed to a new, and that is what liberation is. That the people of Uganda at that time, even in the mental fear, leave alone the way we are talking now, even the mental fear. Remember, when we count freedoms, we forget that freedom from fear is not a freedom. It's a very fundamental freedom under UDR, Universal Declaration of Rights. Freedom from fear. There was even mere fear. Now, if you can be removed from fear to no fear, in fact, Honorable Salaamu imposed fear to say, I don't fear anything. But there's nothing to fear now. So you can see that we cross a bridge, even in mind. So the liberation that we are talking of is from a change of the past status quo to now. Now this brings me to what is the achievement now. The achievement now, I cannot list and finish. I will just point one or two. For example, do you know that we are coming to 40 years? 40 years is too long or even so long to hold a country together.
And how did you procure that 40 years?
The mere fact that we are one piece.
How did you procure that?
I will explain.
Fraud.
I will explain. You see, Judith, the 40 years, many countries have died. People think countries don't die. Many countries have died. 40 years we have seen Yugoslavia die. And that Tito came, Yugoslavia broke into pieces. At one point,
the Roman Empire.
At one point we had Serbia and Montenegro. They qualified in World Cup. They went to quarter. When they went to quarter, they broke in quarter. Then we said, if you win the cup, where will you take it? We are not far from Sudan. Sudan has broken in the 40 years. Somali broke in the 40 years. I think even Eritrea came from Ethiopia in the 40 years. Darfur is threatening to break in the 40 years. So many countries have collapsed. So, under the constitution, the third schedule puts 65 communities. 65 communities, nearly you could call 65 tribes. We have held ourselves together in 40 years. That is not a mean achievement that you can downplay. Europeans sometimes accuse us for tribalism, that we are tribalistic. But I always laugh at them and said, but come on, you have a country like Liechtenstein, which is 37,000 people. If you were not tribalistic, why aren't you under Germany or under Switzerland? A country of 37,000, and they say it's a sovereign country. You have Andorra. You have countries of 5,000. You have Macedonia of 100,000, 130.
Vatican. Now, one square.
So we here have a country like Uganda with 15 million, and we are completely united. So if we were not
united,
if NRM had not been to the task of uniting a country, you can't take for granted that all these other countries are breaking and we have not. You see, you don't always see an occurrence which is preempted when it has not occurred. For example, here we are in Monitor. If you are to make wiring, you may possibly pay an electrician 5 million to wire or 10 million. But if this place gets burned, you'll start valuing in billions. So the fact that NRM has held the country together, you don't see the value. You'd possibly see the value if it had disintegrated. So that is one. Two, the army that we are talking about, I am finding that the critic on the army is on the personality of General MK. And in some discussion I said... Who is the head of the army now?
Okay.
In some discussion I said I didn't have the facts about because at some point his man Balaam comes and said it was hacked. So now I can't know what is the truth. I can't know the truth.
A government.
And
I can't know.
And of course, he is only talking about the most recent as hacked, but there have been a series of other things before.
It can't be hacked.
Should I proceed, Judith?
Yeah, proceed, and then we'll take a break. I'm getting.
Don't take a break without me.
We'll come back and give you as much time, Honourable.
So I wanted to discern the General MK from the entire army. As I've already talked of the inbuilt checks and balances. But I'm saying, if you look at this army, Judith, you are young, but the stories we hear was that in all roads, the other army would say, identity card kwa mkono moja, pesa kwa mkono moja. And it was okay that you are on a roadblock. The army says one hand should hold identity card, one hand should earn money. And it is not even written somewhere.
This mythology.
Two, that is not a myth. That is a fact.
I'll tell you.
Two, do you know that
I'm as old as Uganda.
Do you know that whenever there was operations, all the Mabati houses were uprooted, and soldiers would carry on buses to go home that have looted my iron seats. Can you imagine? How? They were soldiers who were not on any payroll in the army, but they were living in Kampala with their guns. So fundamentally, if you talk of an institutional building, we have built fundamentally a UPDF army which operates under the rule of law. It respects civilians, it has institutions, and we can move. And that's why even when you are pointing a challenge at the leadership, the army is moving. If the army was not well built and you point such a challenge, how would it be moving? It is moving because it is institutionally engraved, it is institutionally strong, and it can move. So we cannot talk of no change at all. How about life expectancy?
We'll come back and we'll give the mic first to Honourable Musumba when we return, and then you will also continue from where you had stopped. If you're listening in, also remember our audiovisual platform is on. You can actually watch this conversation on your gadgets. Just go on to www.kfm.co.ug and you'll follow this discussion. We'll be back shortly. Welcome back from the break. We're still continuing with our discussion on NRM at 39. Is Uganda at a crossroads? And now I'll hand the mic to you, Honourable Salaamu, and then we'll get back to Dr.
Thank you very much. I really want to take us back to the war in northern Uganda, a war of 20 years. The reparations that were undone, and the undone things to repair and mend a society. mentally, socially, infrastructurally, includes the religious institutions, the infrastructure that was put to use of many of a huge population that was never compensated. Look at the Catholic Church and its entire establishment. Look at its schools. Look at its churches. Have you ever compensated the Catholic Church in the northern Uganda? Do they have anywhere to make that demand? I really do think that you eroded the assets of the Catholic Church, and the Catholic Church should give this government a bill of over 100 billion to recover, because on their own they'll never recover their assets, and that erodes the capacity of the Catholic Church to represent all the religious institutions. But the Catholic Church is the richest. You'll go to Gulu Archdiocese. Look at all their churches. Look at how they were all downgraded. And the poor church is watching in poverty, and yet it was a huge engine of social transformation. It has been weakened, and therefore is not doing its requisite work in the community. It would be the one that would be helping in many of these things, having the social glue, the emotional glue. But the church has been reduced to the church mouse that is legendary talked about. So many wrongs committed in northern Uganda. You need to take stock again and do the needful. Now, history is being rewritten in these 40 years. We are rewriting history, because I don't know, Dr. Spire maybe would help us who spend our time in frontline politics. Is there any history about the war in northern in Luwero, for instance? Has anybody? Because everybody is writing their patch.
It's mostly written.
Pecos writes their. It's like the Bible according to a letter to the Corinthians. What? It's a witness account. But this history, has it ever been written? The history of the war in northern Uganda, is it written anywhere? The war West Bank. Is there an account for posterity? And so that is also a deliberate effort, so that you can rewrite and overwrite history, like you rewrote the mustard seed, version 1 and version 2. So this effort, and then you have films about the war written by Bazukulu, not the people who acted. They couldn't even allow the monitor to serialize the war. That too became a weapon. It was weaponized. And so our history is the biggest, it's the meanest thing we are doing to ourselves, because there are things we'll say never again. That's part of accountability. The army, I'll tell you, the day the army entered Kampala, we were the happiest people. I saw my friend Gumi Siriza, thin, walking back and looking for us in Mary Stewart. I saw Hannington Basakana walking, and I said, where have you been? I mean, it was a marvel that there was an army man I knew, a brother, smiling. And you know, they used to be given this food you are given are called what? Rations. And they had nowhere to take it. They had no wives, they had no homes, they were just, delinquents walking the street in army uniform. So they would bring them to us and say, you have this, we have nowhere to take. And so we partook of all these things. So we are talking about an army that we've grown with an army which our schoolmates were part of. And their experience is our experience. I did recommend, as chair of Presidential and Foreign Affairs Committee, that instead of these annual parades, because those parades take a lot of money. I don't know what the meaning is of those parades. I think it's to stamp your military authority on the community again. We propose that as part of nation building, let us have war museums. War museums so that the dead have not died for nothing. Do you know the people who died in all these places? That too has been weaponized. Because the memory must be erased. The collective memory, and be left at individual memory. But there must have been a war museum in Luwero. Now, who remembers who died in Luwero, for instance? Just because they don't want any accountability, they don't want any reminder. What has happened to the war museums? But instead, we have boots on the ground, parades, inspections, things that don't last. As soon as this regime goes, and so their parades go. But what remains of our history? For a long time, we made a constitution. For me, I thought that was the biggest thing we ever did, to write our own homemade constitution. But that too didn't last. It didn't last. But I'll tell you that the enthusiasm, the happiness was palpable that we are getting into a new agreement as we, the people of Uganda, that never again will we bring ourselves to this situation. But that, and the safeguards we put in, recalling our history and all that, all the safeguards, we removed them. And so we find ourselves at the same spot that we sought to cure by writing our own constitution. The military that we were so proud of, that I've described to you, has become an extortionist. Extortion lives on the streets of Kampala, my brother. Go to every washing bay, you will hear horror stories. That is where the real politics is. If you want to know how the government is working and not working, who is going to release money, you will find the latest benzes at the washing bays. That's where the deals are done. The government is run by boys who are out of government because they become the agents of the big people in government. So if you want to know what is happening in government, visit any washing bay and you will know. For a long time we were being told, because for us transitions were a big thing in the constitutional making. So we knew that we had been safeguarded. Let's allow President Museveni to serve his 2 terms and let us have a change of government, even within the movement. So where did the first attack come from? Dr. Besigye in 1999 said, guys, we have veered off the path. And he put it in writing. And in research, I don't know what that 0 point is called. I've become grey in my mind. But it's like the control, the point at which you start measuring front and back. So that control, Dr. Besigye in 1999, before 2000, wrote a letter, a letter to say that we, the NRM, have veered off. And that was the beginning of his trouble, to remind this nation and his colleagues that we are veering off. Let's have an internal discussion about this. And so, when the safeguards were removed of presidential term limits, age limits, all those, when they were removed, then we got a new narrative. Because in the first instance, we had thought that we would prepare the late James Wambogo Wapakabulo, who was a roommate of President Museveni in Dar es Salaam. We had prepared that he should be and I'm talking about we were a group called Young Parliamentarians. We said, now our next president is going to be James Wambogo Apakabulo. That way he was attacked by his own, led him to his grave. Then comes Dr. Besigye and said, listen, we will never get this. Said, you've jumped the queue. We thought Amama Mbabazi was in the queue. So poor guy comes into the queue and see where he ended. Henry Tumukunde also came in the queue. And so many others who thought they were good enough. And yes, they were. But the way the state harangued them to near death. And so what new narrative emerged? This is the point I want to make. They said, leadership will emerge. That's what President Museveni told us, told the country. That don't worry, leadership will what? Emerge. Is this what he meant? The MK thing. Is this what has emerged? This is all they've been preparing all these years to emerge. You see how it has emerged.
Wonderfully.
Wrapped in roses to the people of Uganda. It's a shame that you promise a nation that leadership will emerge, you fail to do the preparations at party level. At party level is where we would have expected the next in line to emerge. That party doesn't exist in the real meaning of what party should prepare.
Yet it does.
No, it does not. No, it does not. It does not. Because if you looked at the internal wars that you have and the internal issues that are going to erupt, which I know will erupt, they are inevitable for all decaying institutions. It will erupt and we will see. Now I am also happily waiting for 10th. Did I say 10th?
10th February.
I am waiting. I will be watching, because now a new opposition made by you has emerged to overrun all the other oppositions. So you will create a new opposition. You will force it in the throats of the Ugandan people, and let us see where we end. So if you're talking about achievements, whatever we had achieved collectively as a nation in the last 4 decades is going to blow up like Khartoum, Omdurman, Libya, and all the like. It's not far-fetched. It's not far-fetched because all the combustible ends are in place. We as a country, reflecting on the 39 years, have been turned into a helpless lot. Very helpless. Those in power are helpless. Those of us who are seeking to provide leadership have also been rendered helpless, institutionally helpless. And so, an entire country with a helpless lot, either way, is not a viable competitive country. I would want to live in a country of promise, as promised on 26th January 1986.
Over to you, Major Awich, then we come back to Dr. Spire.
Okay. I was at the verge of mentioning the list of achievements, which I think we can't finish, but I will mention one more and maybe still clarify, because point I have developed is as good as not developed yet. I was still talking of the cohesiveness of the country that has been maintained, that right now, if a Karamojong went to Kisoro and is talking on phone, nobody in Kisoro would bother whether it's a Karamojong or not. The same thing if a Mufumbira was in Umbale and is talking on phone, nobody bothers. At least we have tried to be one. Remember, as I gave the example of Europe, there are only few countries in Europe which is mixed, which is not a nation state, is maybe Switzerland. Because Switzerland has Swiss French, Swiss German, Swiss Italian, and there's another community. But all these countries are one. Italian, German, what? So for us, NRM to have kept ourselves all this in a harmonious way, I wanted to say it is an achievement. I think, as I said, Switzerland is the only country where the national football coach uses a foreign language like English, because everybody speaks his English. And the same thing like the Uganda Cranes. The national coach will use English because you have Acholi, Karmojong, Basoga, Banyankole in the team. So NRM has kept the country one in harmony, and that is an achievement. Now, there are other indicators which you can check by any researcher. Right now, Uganda economy is the fastest development economy in Africa. By what year measure you may take, whether World Bank or what, we are there. And that is not mean achievement. Connected to this is that by next year, oil will be pumped out. We could, if NRM was not making that achievement, we could sleep in this oil or on this oil for 30, 40, 50 years, and nobody would care. But by next year, May, June, it will come out. It will be reaching Tanzania, plus refinery. The other thing I talked of is that even strong economies like Angola, do you know that the guys have life expectancy of 52 years? We are a life expectancy of 64. We move from 40-something. So people live higher than many strong economies in Africa. We even live higher than Nigerians, which has the strongest economy in Africa. Well, maybe now South Africa is stronger. But we have higher life expectancy than even South Africa. So what else can we do say is no achievement when we pull the life expectancy from 43 to 64? And Dr. Spire, I don't know why you didn't put it in the cartoon. Did you know that a study also proved that of all the East African countries, Ugandans are the happiest? So what is more, living longer and living happier? Now, for you to live longer and live happier, if you check backwards, there are lots of ingredients. It means you eat well. It means you have protective systems like risk to death of accident. It means your sanitation is good. So if you unpackage why you live longer and why you are happier, there are lots of ingredients there. So all this is there. Now, I just want to comment a bit of what Honorable Musumba raised. I am a Catholic myself, and I have not known a claim brought by a Catholic in the war in the North. Civil claims were open to anybody to claim against Attorney General. And that's why those who lost animals made claims. So I am not aware.
Have you ever helped your church to make a claim also to understand that they can claim? But do you understand what I'm saying?
Anyway, yes, but who helped the cattle losers to claim? Because even Catholic Church is an organized institution. I told you I'm a Catholic. But Catholic Church even has a legal department. So do they really need to be helped to make a claim? Because the claim is open. And the earlier they do it, the better. Otherwise, in a right, civil rights.
Then go and help them.
In civil rights, if you equity aids the vigilant.
Help them.
In the law,
they're
saying that equity aids the vigilant. If you sleep on your rights.
I'm going to ask you to wrap up so that I give Dr. Spire the microphone.
So, the Catholic thing, and maybe I will come later about the upcoming leader in NRM. I'll talk about it later. And parade, I wanted to comment about parade because Honorable Musumba was asking about parade.
I'm not asking.
Okay, you could talk about that later, please. Dr. Spire, let's give you the microphone. It's been a while since, we've given Major Awich more time because he's alone, like he said. Major has talked about so many things. Under the NRM, the government has held the country together. It has institutions. It ensures there's respect for the rule of law and so on and so on. In the 39 years, Ugandans are free from fear. Are we actually free from fear? He talks about, I think I'll just stop at that. But when you talk about the rule of law, Ugandans actually not being afraid, I think I've heard from you and a lot of activists and a lot of people in the opposition circles talking about the threats actually that they encounter every day because they are speaking truth to power. They are trying to ensure that there's accountability by our leaders and so on and so forth. Do you agree with what he says, or do you see a complete contradiction, what you're experiencing and what he claims that they are delivering?
Yeah, I think maybe the simplest test to what Major Awich is saying is to ask him to honestly comment about General Muhoozi. If Ugandans are devoid of fear, you just honestly give your honest opinion about General Muhoozi. I'm sure you would be reluctant. But that aside, there is some relative freedom. I would talk about that as a cartoonist. That one would say, oh, Spire, as a cartoonist, some of the cartoons that you have drawn, they cannot be drawn in Rwanda, they cannot be drawn in Zimbabwe, they cannot be drawn in some other countries. But what I find unfortunate is that when we are trying to measure how far we have gone, we tend to compare ourselves with the worst. I don't think you would say, or you would try to measure the performance of your child by saying that they are better than the last in the class. If you really want to assess if your child is doing well, first of all, you objectively look at how they are performing, but also in comparison with those who are excelling. We often tend to go back to history. Before 1986, during Obote, during Amin, now it is 2025, and you're still taking us back to 1986. I'm not saying that to historicize or to make references to the past is entirely unnecessary, but when you make that your perpetual benchmark, it becomes problematic. The world has since moved in many ways, whereby we even have a population, the biggest part of our population, that does not associate at all with what happened before. That when we talk about these things, they think, okay, those are your own stories. Yes, it's relevant to talk about it, but it shouldn't be our major preoccupation. Now, are Ugandans devoid of fear? Is the atmosphere free for us to talk the way we want? Still, we can get examples from all over, even if I don't talk about some of the threats to activists, even if I don't talk about what has personally happened to me. I think anyone would tell you what the atmosphere is like. You could have noticed now on social media that whenever you tweet something that is a bit critical, especially about certain people, one of the responses you would expect is, what color of drone do you want? What does that speak to? It speaks to an environment where people are being kidnapped. We have seen many that are being kidnapped in the cars that we have branded as drones. At a time when we are celebrating that liberation, even up to now, there are people who are reported being picked, and it's only increasing. Because maybe around the 1990s, it could have been less, 2000s, but we are only going, the curve is only going up. Is that a marker of freedom? The fears that people have, even to talk about things that are basic. You've seen me sharing screenshots of people who come to my inbox about all sorts of problems, but one of the standard closing line is,
hide my identity.
Do not reveal my identity. So why would someone be talking about a bad road in their area and they end by saying, do not reveal my identity? Someone is talking about a poor hospital, do not reveal my identity. Talking about a school that is almost collapsing or a case of corruption. And the standard closure is, do not reveal my identity. So in many ways, there is a lot of fear in the population. There are so many things that people would want to talk to if there was an environment, rather to talk about if there was an environment where they could speak. But you see that the voices that are speaking out are few. There's so many that you see on social media are behind fake identities, where you see such a phenomenon of people coming out to speak, but they have to first hide, they have to first create a fake account. It tells you that they cannot speak freely. So you'll have the likes of Honorable Salaamu, Musumba, the likes of Besigye, but how many are they? And how do they live their lives? In some cases, of course, there would be a bit of fear. This one is going to raise a lot of noise if they are touched. But even we see some still, even with all that, what happened to Kakwenza? Now, this is everywhere, globally. A person who simply tweeted about the first son, whatever he said, whether it was appropriate or not, but being tortured to that extent. And where even the courts were in fear that this person was taken to court, clearly tortured. But the judge himself could not say that, no, we cannot continue with this when the accused is tortured like this. What does that speak of? Does it show an environment of freedom to speak? I will highlight one other thing. Constitutionally, we have the right, the freedom to assemble, the freedom one would be free constitutionally to demonstrate peacefully about whatever they are uncomfortable about. But tell me the last demonstration that you saw in this country that was critical about what is happening. Tell me the last one that was permitted.
10th.
Huh?
10th Feb. The only one.
10th Feb. So the only demonstrations you can see is either like this one, which the first son is now calling, now that he has been summoned by Parliament. Now he's announcing that they are going to march to Parliament, and it's now that he's saying that they are clowns, they are thieves. Yet when we were talking about the same thing, young people were bundled up, arrested, only holding a placard, "Stop Corruption." Only holding a parliament, a placard about the speaker, about whatever is happening in parliament. You saw how they were treated. They spent weeks in jail just for that. Young people. But now that the first son is saying he wants to demonstrate, I think if he insists on it, he will have the freedom to walk to parliament. The other day when the president wanted to walk about corruption, which corruption is under his own court, he could walk. But you, even right now from these studios, General Awich, go out with a placard there, only having a small statement, "Let us fight corruption in this country," and you see what happens to you. So is that an indicator of freedom? The other day when we saw people who are Agatha and a few others were walking to the Supreme Court to raise the issue about the continued trial of civilians in the court-martial. What happened to them? Is that the freedom that we are talking about? So I know that even General Awich is aware of this. Those in the system are aware that we are living under a lot of fear. But there are things often on the outside that would give a semblance of what he talked about, that Ugandans are the happiest. Some of the things we call happiness are not actual happiness. They are compensations, they are ways of compensating, or they are ways of what
coping.
Psychologists here call coping mechanisms. When you're in a country, when you notice in a country that people are so into making fun of everything, when people joke a lot, when there is a lot of humor, a lot of comedy, it's often an indicator that they are struggling with something. In fact, you just read around the histories of dictatorships and humor. Everywhere there have been dictatorships, humor tends to go up, because that is how people find alternative ways of holding this painful, of living with the pains. Now, for a person who just looks at the surface, they'll say that that is happiness. Actually, even to some of these people, they could get to a point of a false consciousness of interpreting that as happiness. So how is happiness actually measured when we talk about Ugandans as the happiest? What are we exactly measuring?
What are we happy about?
Yes, I'm told it's time to take a break, but I'll still come back and give you the mic for a few more minutes, then we get back to Major. Welcome back from the break. And Dr. Spire, of course, we're still giving you the mic as we just give a minute for Dr. Awich to return. But before we do that, of course, the 10-point program, let me just a reminder, because this is the campaign or the foundation that on which this party, the ruling party, was built. Democracy, it wasn't.
This is not, no. The error there is that this party, it wasn't this party. It was the NRM.
Yes, not the party.
Not the party.
The National Resistance Movement.
Yes.
Democracy, security. 3, consolidation of national unity and elimination of all forms of sectarianism. 4, defending and consolidating national independence. 5, building an independent, integrated and self-sustaining national economy. 6, restoration and improvement of social services and the rehabilitation of the war-ravaged areas. 7, elimination of corruption and misuse of power. And I think I'm not going to go all the way to 10. I'll stop at that. Elimination of corruption and misuse of power. Major, we're just going through the 10-point program, but we're just stopping at number 7 for emphasis, because I think by far that has been the biggest challenge that the NRM has had to grapple with, the misuse of power and the corruption. But Dr. Spire, you were still on the mic. Just proceed, pick up from where you had stopped, and then we get back.
Yeah. I was still talking about happiness and how it is measured and whether Ugandans are actually happy. Of course, I cannot say in general terms that Ugandans are not happy. There are those who are happy and actually very, very happy. Although it is a kind of happiness that is naive, because you cannot be happy in a country where you see that people are so angry. Social media might not be a complete picture of Uganda and what Ugandans think, but if you just take even just a one-day scan of what people are saying on social media, you really see an angry population. You see an angry people. So even when I'm comfortable, even when I'm driving all these huge cars and I've invested immensely, I don't think I can really be happy in such an environment, because it is not sustainable. What we are building, both for those who have a lot and those who don't have, or who have too little, unfortunately, it is not sustainable. Ultimately, it can collapse on us, and there are all signs that there is a possibility of it collapsing, where we cannot tell where we are going in terms of leadership, what is going to happen after President Museveni, when is he actually leaving. He also seems to be trapped within the same thing that he has created.
Set up for us.
That every time he looks at the exit, there are so many questions that come in his mind. What is going to happen when I exit? What is happening to me? What is going to happen to my family? What is going to happen to all we have accumulated? And even those around him, that now they see their own safety and the security of all they have amassed in the person of the president, and that's why they would rather he dies there. But that's exactly what I'm talking about, that him dying there does not really protect you. Him living there until everyone is frustrated and tired and angry, it only puts you in danger. So even if we are to talk about happiness and consider those few that are very happy, very successful financially, I don't think it is sustainable. I happened to talk to so many people in the system, in the army, police, but they also tell you that many of us are actually investing outside. Well, they can't now. There are so many limitations in investing in Europe, America. Now they are investing in other African countries, investing in Tanzania, Kenya, Seychelles,
Dubai.
And I don't think that's how they would want it to end. I don't think, no matter how much you've invested, you don't want to end up living in Tanzania, even if you have schools, hotels there, and even living under the fear that at a certain point the international legal regimes could change, even requiring you to surrender some of the things that you have invested in other African countries. But now coming down to the 10-point program, even as you were reading it, I think immediately you are getting examples in mind of contradictions.
Already.
And the listeners, I imagine, every point you read, they just see glaring contradictions. You read about sectarianism, and you see what is happening, the entrenchment of certain tribes. which they don't want us to talk about.
They're there.
I'm sure
Go
that
to the
even
airport.
now as
Just
I'm
go to the
speaking,
airport.
some people will say Spire is a tribalist.
I am.
So the one who is speaking about it is the tribalist. But talking about the actual things which are even reported in government reports, the Equal Opportunities Commission reported last time in their report of last year. They showed all these statistics. Who is heading many of these MDAs?
Yes.
They showed the statistics and they were glaring to show that there is imbalance in this country.
The DPCs.
Yes, which is unconstitutional because in our national objectives we talk about that it is mentioned explicitly that the running and composition of government should have a national character. So why is it that we can't talk about it? Why is it that whenever you start that conversation, someone is uncomfortable and they want to create the impression that you're the one who is dividing people and not the other one who is creating the pain of others not seeing themselves in the composition of government? Major Awich here will not talk about it, but I'm sure when he looks at the entire sketch of the composition of government, he's not happy as where he comes from and whether that region is well reflected. Actually, maybe me coming from central Uganda, I would say that there is relatively some inclusion. But for the Awiches, it is quite terrible. You look at all the heads of these, the bodies that we have talked about. You see,
No.
you see, it is even very easy for you to mention the name because they are few. But others would name an entire institution. You go to...
I'm telling you, you go for their burials,
yes,
for their weddings, their social events.
Some institutions
You are at the outsider.
and you'll hear the language
And they even
being
look at you
spoken
with this
there.
demeaning look.
But it is, the institutions have become vernacular. So, and they don't want us to talk about all that.
We will.
It is glaring everywhere, be it in the army. Honorable Salaamu Musumba talked about the court-martial. I shared the names recently of the members of that court-martial. Do they really represent the national character? Do we see ourselves in that court-martial? Now imagine a soldier appearing before that group of people, a team of people that are more like, she calls it a clan. And you come from another region, you're being tried by these people. What comes in mind, because we talk about justice, that it's not just about the justice itself being done, but
I met
even
the
composition.
I met Sam Mengola at the court-martial. Fending for his sister or relative. And the frustration in his face. You see, just the face, without talking, just the face is so debilitating. And he says, listen, why don't you try them? These are people who were arrested in pastors in different churches. They were all collected and thrown in the court-martial. And have not been tried for 4 years. 4!
Yeah, so that is just one.
And that one is NRM. Bleeding.
Oh no, let Dr. Spire.
So it is just one that when we talk about sectarianism, don't believe what Spire is saying, don't believe what Salaamu Musumba is saying. Go to your own reports, government reports and what they are showing. Or just see for yourself, just make a random visit to many of the institutions.
Now they put masks.
Yeah, so that is one. Then
Cover
social
up.
services, I will not say anything about that. Corruption and misuse of power. They are institutions meant to fight corruption. We have them in the country. We have the IGG. We have these courts and corruption court. We have so many bodies and layers created over layers, State House and corruption. There is another one that was created the other day being headed by someone who is actually a convict. So what does all this show? It simply shows that we just want to give a semblance, a facade of us fighting corruption, when actually we are not really interested. Because if we were, the evidence is there. The other day, Betty Kamya comes up and says that let's have a lifestyle audit. The president in front of the cameras said, no, that's not a good idea because we are going to scare away they are going to go and invest it somewhere else. And who are these people we are worried about? You see, when overstaying in power, some people say that this is not a problem, but those are some of the dilemmas that it creates. That at a certain point you find yourself surrounded by friends, surrounded by people you care so much about that whenever you talk about corruption, you know they are going to be trapped. There is an in-law there is this other one who has stolen this much, and that you're also part of that entire web. And I think that is where the system is now. You cannot fight the lower thieves when the higher thieves are your people, and whenever you touch which will say,
but there's a bigger one
so
out there.
And so, some kutesa, this one, and it's why me? So in the end, what happens? Everyone gets away with it. So instead of corruption being the thing that we are concerned about, we are concerned about the ones talking about corruption. As I said earlier, we are concerned about those who raise noises about it. So if we talk about progress, I don't know whether that is progress. We talk about the misuse of power. The case of the CDF is the most glaring ones, but we see so many others. We see these people who are constantly, maybe for the cameras, taken to prisons, the Mawandas and the group. And then someone goes to a rally and says, well, as long as they steal and share with you, what is the problem? Then the Mawandas are soon out. Then the first son is threatening, saying that if stop imprisoning these and these people when the biggest thief is the in-law. The son-in-law.
Interesting perspective, Doctor.
I love that drama.
I've been reminded we are only left with 8 minutes. I don't know where time has actually gone. But there's a comment here. As the President comes on set this evening, should we instead expect or demand accountability of the 10-point program? In many of his speeches, he likes to refer to 1986. But when you look at where we are and whether indeed he deeply reflects on these issues, do you think he feels proud of the 40-year journey he has been on and at the helm, at the steering wheel or the helm of the NRM? This is just a random question to any of you. But I think, Major Awich, it's time for you to come. But we are really, really running out of time. I don't know how you're even going to summarize this.
I'll try to summarize. So that is the irony here. We don't have the time. But I still want to talk about freedom. That I insist that we are free. And that's a fundamental mark. If you look at mass media alone, today is Saturday. The way people in Uganda are talking on the radio and blasting government, whether in Lira, whether in Gulu, whether in Kabale, whether in Umbara, averagely every big town has a minimum of 5 radio stations. And all this, in Lira they are about 10. I'm just putting the average. And all these people will blast the government and go back and sleep soundly. Now,
what were they expected to do? To die?
I mean, if there was no freedom, something bad would happen. If there was no freedom, something bad would happen. But this is what happens. Now, there are some, of course, occurrences inside, in various enforcement procedures, that some actors infringe on rights of others. And how do you judge government? How do you judge us? By institutional build-up. There is a law called the Human Rights Enforcement Act. It's now saying, if you're a police officer with your excitement, you go to arrest Mr. Okwir and you break his leg. Before that, the defense was, sue Attorney General. I broke the leg, but I was doing government work. Now, no more. Now you break the leg, you are personally liable. So what is this? This is an inbuilt system in the government to know that while we guarantee freedom, the actors in there you need to police the policeman. So we can't judge us by individual acts. Somebody has put one in a drone, the other one, because that drone person can be held liable. Because the Human Rights Enforcement Act is there. You just need to follow it up. So, now, about the generalization in the social media, in social media, everybody can throw. And then when you need to look at the social psychology of the people. There was a research done in Germany where they wanted to know how people think generally. Somebody went on the street and asked that, you know what, this government is so bad. The sun is always rising from the east to the west. We want you to sign a petition. We remove this government. The sun should rise from the west to the east. And people just came and signed. People signed. So the guys went back to parliament and said, this is what you are saying. So we need to be careful about judging on social media that you said is so alarming. If anything, Article 1 provision is there. That the 5 years is, if you are so annoyed, we shall put a pot, you vote, and said, you know what, we are so annoyed with you, go. And to the best of my knowledge, the elections is free and fair. So that is the only judgment.
Ask 1 trillion.
That is the only. Now, finally, on a 10-point program, I'm not going to talk so much about. But now I want you to know that this son of Kaguta, when he puts his mind on something, it works. For example, Karamoja. He mentioned Karamoja in that thing. Do you know Karamoja is now civilized? They are trading centers. People see they are not walking naked. They are not killing each other. Do you know how many elders have been targeted and killed in Karamoja? Down to the extent that if you drive in Karamoja now, you find people trading centers with radios, drinking. Why are they just sitting peacefully?
But also a big bulk of the Karamoja population is in jail, and the president talked about it the other time, that locking them up was actually one way of, I think, creating stability or something. About 900,000.
Yes.
And they are killed.
Do you know what will happen in
elders
Karamoja?
killed in Karamoja.
You have communities like Bokora and Matheniko. These people don't clash in a small community like 6 football pitches put together. And 800 people dead. Not a community to another.
Okay,
so you need to take drastic measures.
We have to wind up. You'll just actually give me your conclusion and then we move.
My conclusion is, I thank NRM for the 40 years that we are going to achieve, because you cannot achieve this without people's support. No amount of helicopter, no amount of tank would make us be here for 40 years. We are only here for these years because we do what meets the aspirations of the people.
Thank you. Honorable Musumba, in a minute, please.
Yes, thank you very much. And I think as a society, we need to have a reset and accept that feedback on social media is very informative of how people feel about you. It's not artificial information. It is true feedback for free to help any effective government understand the people it's leading. What we are all looking at is really a display of failure of building a very versatile country that we thought we would, with all our knowledge, with all our enthusiasm, our aspirations. But as an entire country, we live now in fog, real fog. I want you to do some research. Just watch the people in the cars as they drive back home or out of town or in town. You will read sadness in their faces, uncertainty in their faces. And what government is doing to us, its population, is that because they too are in fear, they are gripped with fear, the only thing they have is attack, not listen. They've closed their ears and noses. And Abasokas say, you stop listening, you stop smelling, and therefore you're walking with your eyes open.
Thank you.
To your end.
I'll give the mic now to Dr. Spire, please. Your conclusion.
Yeah, it's discussions like these are very important, but the unfortunate thing is that often they end at nothing. It's like we are speaking to a wall, You talk about all these things and you think they are too obvious that anyone would feel need to do something about them. But it takes us back to what I said earlier, that we seem to be trapped. Even those who are within are trapped, that whenever they think about alternative action, they still feel that action is putting them in danger. But it has been their own construction. We really need, as a country, to think about where we are going, and not just to pick these random achievements here, this, that, because even countries like Sudan have been, I'm sure they were reporting that they were doing well in terms of their GDP, economically, what
and
life
even in their
expectancy.
elections, 80%.
Yes, Libya could also have reported at some point under Gaddafi that we are doing well. But when the future, where you're heading is a mist or a fog, as Honorable Salaamu has said, you cannot celebrate that. You can't celebrate when Major Awich, of course it's unfortunate that I have to refer to you because you're the one here, when you don't know what tomorrow is going to bring, not only to you, even if you die, even if I die, but your child, the kind of world, the kind of Uganda they are going to inherit, if it is under that suspense, if it is under that fear that, what kind of transition are we going to have? That is not sustainable, and we should all be concerned, both those who are...
For now, it is bye-bye, and have yourselves a pleasant weekend.